I have never seen a level of unifying public anger about a particular scandal within the British public as significant as this. It is all that anyone is talking about, and people, including the victims, want a national inquiry. So you would think, of course, that this is a no-brainer. The government would want to get this heat off their backs and grant a national inquiry. Well, a vote was put forward to Parliament just yesterday for exactly that. And you might be thinking, surely that passed. But it didn't, and it didn't pass because every single Labour MP chose to either vote against it or abstain. And I'll come back to that a little bit later.
The ayes to the right were 111, the noes to the left 364, so the noes have it, the noes have it.
This extraordinary voting result all stems from an extraordinary decision that one man made. And that one man, of course, was Keir Starmer. And the decision that he made was to put out a 3-line whip when it came to this vote. What that means is every single member of his party, the Labour Party, has to vote against this bill, otherwise he will remove the whip from them. They'll no longer be a Labour MP. Now, why would a government, when faced with this level of outrage and this level of outcry, do something like that? Any government that has nothing to hide, any political party that had nothing to hide, simply would not behave in this way. But the Labour Party, they do have something to hide. In fact, they have a lot to hide, and that's what we're going to get onto in this video. I believe, truly, genuinely, that if a full national inquiry were produced and it told the full story of this picture, the Labour Party would no longer be a credible party in this country, ever. It would generationally destroy the Labour Party, and that is why they cannot allow this to happen. Let's start with the most obvious reason why the Labour Party do not want this investigation to go ahead, and it's very, very simple. The perpetrators of these crimes were men of the Islamic faith. And who do those men vote for? Not only that, who do those men command their wives to go and vote for? Well, it's the Labour Party, of course. That is a well and generally understood fact. And the Labour Party has a long history of appeasing this crowd in order to win their votes. I'll put a picture up here so you can take a look at it. And this is a real Labour Party conference meeting. And what do you notice? Everyone there is of the Islamic faith, but not only that, they are segregated, men on one side, women on the other. Surely that's not a Labour Party value, but they're willing to stoop to those depths to appease their voting base. They are that desperate for votes. I'll give you another example. The Labour Party wants to introduce a definition of Islamophobia that would prevent us from ever talking about these crimes ever again, or at least in an honest and sincere way.
We know that people were scared to tell the truth because they thought they would be called racist. If we want to stop this from ever happening again, we cannot be afraid. Yep. The Labour Party has adopted the APPG definition of Islamophobia. That same APPG report said talking about was an example of Islamophobia. This is exactly why people are scared to tell the truth.
Of course, at this point, you might be thinking to yourself, well, the Labour Party might have stooped to the depths of segregating men and women at one of their party conferences, but they would not go to the depths of covering up crimes just to win votes. But they did. And we can prove it. Simon Danczuk, he was the Labour MP for Rochdale between 2010 and 2017. And of course, Rochdale was one of the areas that was very badly hit by this scandal. Now, Danczuk, he wanted to raise the alarm. He wanted to blow the whistle and make this as big a deal as possible. But what was the Labour Party's response? Well, the Labour Party chairman, Tony Lloyd, told him he absolutely must not raise the issue of the ethnicity of the offenders. And if he did so, he would bounce me from Rochdale to Westminster. Basically, a threat of violence from the Labour Party chairman to an MP who was concerned about what was going on in his constituency. Now, Simon Danczuk, he actually gives some other names. Unfortunately, the people who he names have since passed away, so cannot be held to account for their actions and, importantly, cannot defend themselves against these claims. But he gives some other names of people in the Labour Party who were also threatening towards him and basically saying, you are going to hurt the Labour Party's electoral chances if you keep talking about this and raising the issue of the ethnicity of the offenders. I will link the article, it's in the Telegraph, where Simon Danczuk talks about this and exposes this, and you can go and read it for yourself. It's very shocking, but what it also is proof. Even if just one anecdotal piece of evidence, it is proof that the Labour Party were willing to do this just to secure votes. Let's talk about the big guy for a second, Sir Keir Starmer. We know that before he was Prime Minister and before he was the leader of the Labour Party, he was the Director of Public Prosecutions, specifically between 2008 and 2013. Basically, that means that he is the head of the Crown Prosecution Service. And in 2011, that's when these cases really started to come into the public fold. So we know that he was the head of the CPS. All of the CPS lawyers that were working underneath him, well, he should have had oversight of them and the decisions that they were making, right? Now, why do I say all of that? I say all of that because obviously these cases should have crossed his desk and he should have had eyes on them. In 2009, a girl was caught in Rochdale smashing up a restaurant called the Balti House. Now, at first, police just thought this was just a vandal, a runaway team was just smashing up a restaurant. But they interviewed her, and over 6 hours, she went into great detail about the abuse that she was receiving. Effectively, she was being passed around different northern towns across the country. Not only that, she told the police that I'm not the only one, there are loads of other girls who this is happening to. It's an entire network. Now, the police took 11 months to put together a report, and in that report, it contained some really shocking details. It even had DNA evidence from who she alleged was an offender on her underwear. So that surely is an open and shut case for at least having a prosecution, right? Well, the CPS lawyer who looked at this decided that she was not credible and all of the evidence that she had presented was not credible and that this would not be going to trial. That CPS lawyer would have answered to Sir Keir Starmer, and this would have been such serious claims. I have absolutely no doubt that he would have wanted to have oversight of that decision himself, and presumably he agreed with it, he approved of it. Now, thankfully, years later, when this really started to emerge, she eventually was listened to and her perpetrators, her offenders, were brought to justice, although have since been released and are still roaming the streets, which is absolutely shocking. It's a really terrible story, but it's just one story. How many more stories are there like that of CPS lawyers working under Keir Starmer with oversight from Keir Starmer that were completely derelict in their duties, that simply did not believe victims or did not want to believe victims because, in truth, this was such a difficult story. I should add to the previous point, by the way, that Keir Starmer did actually apologise for his time as the Director of Public Prosecutions. He apologised and said that the CPS had let these victims down. But what he didn't say was how they had let them down or how many victims they had let down. And I guess we won't know until we get an inquiry. Now look, by this point, you might be screaming at the screen saying, hey, these are just a handful of anecdotal things. This wouldn't destroy the Labour Party. But hear me out. In almost every single one of the towns affected by this scandal, Rochdale, Rotherham, Oldham, all of these towns, except for I think 3, they were Labour held. Labour councillors, Labour MPs. So if we had a full inquiry into this, exposing how the local councils had behaved, how the local police forces had behaved, what they all knew and when, going through all of their email correspondence over this and the attempt, I have no doubt, to cover this up, which party would come out of this looking absolutely disastrous? You see, it would be the Labour Party. You might find one Tory MP who comes out and gets held to account and 30 Labour MPs and hundreds of Labour councillors. It would be devastating. It would be a devastating legacy for the Labour Party. And that's why they simply cannot afford to have this inquiry go ahead. I don't think if people truly understood the scale of Labour's complicity in all of this, they would ever bring themselves to vote for the Labour Party again. The Labour Party would simply be shuffled off and replaced by the Liberal Democrats. I truly think it would be the end of the party. So they will never allow as far as I'm concerned, for a proper public inquiry. So what's the end state in all of this then? Well, the end state is quite simple. You see, in the 50 or so towns where this has happened, almost every single one of them has a Labour MP. And so because of Keir Starmer's decision to order a 3-line whip, and the Labour MP's cowardice to refuse to go along with the 3-line whip, well, because of those two factors combined, in every single one of the towns where this happened, they have been betrayed by their own MP. It gets a little bit worse though, somehow, if you can imagine that, because despite Keir Starmer ordering all of his own MPs to do this, he abstained. I mentioned at the start of this video that a certain number of Labour MPs actually abstained, refusing to vote either yes or no in favour of the inquiry. And Keir Starmer was one of them. In fact, in the cabinet, 6 out of 8 of the cabinet ministers abstained on this vote. So Keir Starmer told all of his own people, betray your own constituents, but then when it came to it, he himself didn't even have the courage to lead from the front and do that. Absolutely bizarre. The only time a leader should really be abstaining in a vote this serious is when it's been made a free vote and he doesn't want to influence the decisions of his own MPs by voting one way or another. He wants them to make their own minds up and not think, I better do this because the leader of the party is doing this as well. That's the only reason I can think of why the leader of a party, or the Prime Minister of all things, should be abstaining in a vote. But of course, that wasn't the situation here. He'd already ordered the 3-line whip. There is literally no excuse for him to abstain. It's just, I don't know, it just looks like cowardice. It's very bizarre. Or maybe he just thought, well, I'll let the rest of my party make this terrible decision and I'll wash my hands of it. How is this guy going to make it to 2029 as the Labour Party leader and the Prime Minister? I don't see it happening. In fact, I'd be surprised if he makes it to the end of the year. I want to add one more point as well, which is that you'll see a lot of Labour Party members, MPs and their cheerleaders will say things like, we've already had inquiries, we just need to get on with taking action now. We have not had inquiries. What we've had is a couple of local inquiries, and then we had the J report, which was not focused on this one specific issue at all. It was focused on a broader segment of crime in which only 6 towns were looked at, and it was Rotherham, for example, one of the most serious cases, was mentioned once in the entire report. We have not, don't let them gaslight you, we have not had a proper inquiry into this at all. It's simply not true. They're just trying to shuffle this under the rug and say, oh, that's already been done, you're just falling for far-right tropes, blah blah blah. That's not true. You're not. You're just a decent, honest citizen in this country who wants the truth to come out. That is all it is. Come here, crazy. Come here. Good girl. Good girl. Now, to the very kind ladies in the comments who were telling me that it looks very cold and I need a scarf and a woolly hat, don't worry, I promise you, I am not cold. It looks colder than it is. There's no wind. It's totally fine. But look, I really appreciate all the support I get on this channel. It's absolutely amazing. If you're not subscribed yet, please do subscribe, like, leave a comment. I try and reply to as many comments as I can, especially when the video's just been launched, but then it gets a little bit more difficult as I start thinking about the next video. I can only do so many tasks at once, so if I do miss your comments, I'm really, really sorry. But yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for all the support. Till the next one.